My name is Bill Martin, Director of the Valentine, and I'm so happy to have been selected to moderate this panel this morning. Before we begin, I want to think about, for a moment, imagine Richmond in 1968. It's not a moment not unlike today in many ways. There's a real sense in the nation, in the Commonwealth, in the city, that things are coming apart. But also that change was in the air. Think about downtown. Guess what? We're building a new Coliseum 50 years ago. There's the demolition in progress for the downtown expressway. The new city hall was under construction, and there was demolition around the old public library to create the new Richmond Public Library. When we think about what the climate and the political climate and social climate in this time, it's the assassination of Martin Luther King and riots on Broad Street. There were almost daily protests during this period with Virginia Union students coming from that campus to Monroe Park to protest. It was the assassination of Robert Kennedy, the unraveling of Vietnam with the Tet Offensive. There are anti-war protests in Monroe Park. The schizophrenia of the day is really reflected, I think, when you see that both Gene McCarthy and George Wallace come to Richmond to campaign. One of the bigger changes was there was liquor by the drink. Was finally, and the tunes go off. This is good. Right on cue. And here on this campus, new dorms open on Monroe Park. There's also demolition for what will become the old library. Major construction in both on the MCV campus. And it's within this context that VCU becomes a place. And I think the challenges of that moment required the creation of Virginia's first urban university. And today we need to talk about how we've grown and how the challenges of the city continue to inform what happens today. We have an amazing panel. John Kneebone, Associate Professor at the VCU Department of History, an amazing partner for the Valentine, providing amazing students for the Valentine. Certainly teaches the history of the American South, and with Dr. Trani's writing, a history of VCU. Jody Koski is head of the Thompson McCall Library, Special Collections, and is again another amazing neighbor down by the Valentine. And then there's Dr. Trani, the transformational president of this university from 1990 to 2009. And before we go any further, I think that we should stand and give Dr. Trani a tribute for the things that he's done for this university. So let's get started. A question on the Wayne Commission itself. John, we'll start with you. What were the aspirations of the Wayne Commission? What was happening?
Actually, I think I'd begin, but you used the word schizophrenic. It was a moment when Virginia was going through political change, modernization, new people moving in, and there was a sense in the mid-'60s that Virginia's future was going to be urban, manufacturing, industrial, and it needed better education system, higher education in particular. And that was very optimistic. The Wayne Commission rides that wave of optimism, just as all the things that Bill was talking about. 1968, political conflict, urban rioting, and there were riots here in Richmond following the murder of Martin Luther King. And as well, sort of hidden in the background, 1968 saw the Supreme Court decide in the case of New Kent Greene versus New Kent County, that it was time to end shilly-shallying about desegregation in the schools, with the consequence in Richmond of busing and then white flight to the counties, disappearing and leaving. And behind the scenes, secretly, the city fathers were negotiating, despite the Voting Rights Act of 1965, to annex a large portion of Chesterfield County with white population, to restore a white majority in the city of Richmond. And these things played out in a way that almost immediately what had been optimistically urban had become urban as a synonym for problems, for difficulties, and in a way the building up of VCU as an urban university became not just riding a wave, but fundamental to pulling Richmond along with it. And I think in some ways the struggles of the early 20 years of VCU coming together are reflected in the city. And certainly since 1990, Richmond's been on the rise, and VCU has been riding with it. The Wayne Commission reflected all sorts of these things. And one of the things that they reflected was a great deal of optimism about the future as an urban university. And I'll close here by saying that first they captured in important ways what VCU's mission was and continues to be. I want to give a shout out here to somebody who's been thoroughly forgotten, a man named Roland Nelson, who came here with the retirement of George Oliver as the second president of RPI. He arrived in 1967 as president of RPI to have his university disappear under him. And even worse, he was told that he would be demoted to become provost of the academic campus. Blackwell Smith, who'd been provost and president at the medical school, was in ill health and actually welcomed the shift to provost, and shortly after that retired. Roland Nelson left for Marshall University shortly after that. But he emphasized throughout this process that the future of RPI and then VCU was urban university. It needed to be in Richmond. And we forget that the Henrico County delegation lobbied really hard for the university to be established in eastern Henrico County in the Elko Tract. And it was thanks to Roland Nelson and the city that pushed awfully hard to get the Wayne Commission to commit to an urban university with a campus in the city. So,
as we think about the health campus, what was the impact on the health campus on MCV?
Well, initially, they carried on with business as usual. I think they were anticipating enjoying all the benefits that a university might bring. At that particular time, it was starting to be challenging for freestanding medical centers to obtain funding from NIH and others. And so it was a good move for the university, and they were actually, or good move for the medical school. And there were actually a number of advocates who wanted to see university status. I mean, it certainly helped all of the baccalaureate programs that MCV offered because they did not have the infrastructure for teaching the humanities and social sciences to their nursing students and pharmacy students. So it was a tremendous opportunity, even though they may not have always, certainly the alumni didn't welcome it with open arms.
Dr. Trani, what would VC look like if there had not been the Wayne Commission?
First of all, I apologize. That was the Notre Dame Victory March. And there actually have been some victories this year. There's a moral there to turn off your telephone. I think the Wayne Commission set the framework for, obviously, what my predecessors and their colleagues, the faculty, the alums, the students really were working for, which was an integrated university. And I think there is no question that that is the most important thing that has happened in the last 50 years. We truly are an integrated university. And I said over the period of time that I served as president, that I had the good fortune to serve as president, that nomenclature was the least important thing in this movement. It was integrating engineering and medicine, the research effort on both campuses, establishing a school of engineering, creating the VCU health system, which separated the clinical operations of the university from a university budget code and have allowed the medical center clinically to flourish with new construction and both downtown Richmond and outside of Richmond. So there is no question in my mind, and that I've had the good fortune to both serve as president for 19 years and to spend the last 6 years with John Kneebone completing a manuscript on VCU from 1968 to 2009. But without any question, it is the emergence of VCU as a university with all that that entails, a growth in population from 21 to 32,000 students, physical growth that President Rao has continued dramatically on both campuses, but we are now a university and recognized as a university, and I think that is the most significant thing that the Wayne Commission hoped for, and I think that promise has been fulfilled.
Is there any part of that promise that is not fulfilled today, that's the unfulfilled promise of the Wayne Commission?
John, do you want to comment on that?
I don't know that there is. The Wayne Commission, in the spirit of urban renewal of the 1960s, did propose that the campus here would ultimately extend all the way to the James River to the south. They didn't reckon with Oregon Hill neighborhood, which...
I used to be 6'8" when that started.
Yeah. And in some ways, that's a crucial decision that Dr. Trani made on his arrival, was the decision to turn away from venturing towards the south and to commit VCU to moving north and to a better relationship with the neighborhoods.
Are there any other pivot points in the last 50 years where the university made a critical decision that affected the future? Talk about the decision with...
Well, Dr. Trani, you tell the story of not long after you arrived being visited by two businessmen who proposed to you a biotechnology research center. And I'll let you explain what happened. And basically, they said you took the idea and ran with it.
Yeah. What John is talking about is two senior leaders of the business community and leaders of an organization that used to be called Richmond Renaissance, but is now called Venture Richmond. T. Justin Moore and Henry Valentine came to see me shortly after I arrived and talked about a technology park, and would I take a look at a technology park? And I indicated that I would, though there were 11 underfunded schools at Virginia Commonwealth University, and that was my first and most important obligation. And we had a study done, and that study said that yes, there was a possibility of a technology park with 3 conditions. Number 1, it had to be in the university's major research strength, which was clearly the life sciences. Number 2, it could not just be the university's research park. It had to be the cities, the counties, the states. They had to invest in it and support it. And third, it had to be located immediately adjacent to the medical center. And if you think about both that and the physical building up of Virginia Commonwealth University, we were fragmented academically, but we were also fragmented physically early on. And what the Biotech Research Park did was it solidified the neighborhood of the medical center. And now you have located down there the State Forensics Lab, the State Laboratories, UNOS is located down there, a major research facility for Altria, a new research facility that is sponsored by the Gates Foundation, Medicines for All, which you ought to study about and learn something about. So that whole area solidified the medical center down there, and then the dramatic movement to expand and build out the borders of what used to be called the academic campus. And you talk about resentment. The medical campus would say, what are we, chopped liver? We're not academic. So you needed a name change of this campus, and certainly Monroe Park became more and more significant to the university. So I think the fleshing out of the boundaries of the university, both campuses, the movement north, not fulfilling the original desire of the some of the founders that you consider moving to the Elko track. There was later a movement to move both business and engineering out to West Creek, and I think that would have been a disaster. So what we are now is a university without walls that has two wonderful campuses in downtown Richmond with a supportive city and state government in terms of the development of Virginia Commonwealth University. But it is a university, and I think without any question that's the most significant thing of all.
Jody, when we think about pivot points on the health campus, what are sort of the pivot points there?
Well, obtaining the bond for the main hospital, that was a big thing, and had been a struggle for quite some time, and being able to push that through and finally getting the first modern hospital in about 40 years, I think was significant. The development of the private practice group for the physicians that evolved into MCV Physicians, I think that was also another pivotal point as well. And I'll echo what Dr. Rao said about 2011 in basketball. I think Dr. Trani has some stories about MCV campus alums that came up and talked to him after the basketball triumph, and how that was very instrumental in bringing together the two elements of the university.
Yeah, there has been a dramatic change in terms of the branding of the university, a conscious branding of the university, and certainly this video is part of that. And I would say two of the more significant occasions were the Final Four in basketball, and you had physicians downtown wearing gold T-shirts in operating rooms. They really identified with that, and clearly that was a major national part of the recognition, because once people heard VCU and then checked on the School of the Arts or the School of Social Work or the emerging School of Engineering or the Medical Center, they had their socks knocked off in terms of the strength of the university. And I think the second major branding exercise is international, and that is the now more than 20-year partnership with the Catter Foundation and the School of the Arts. That put us in the company. We were the first institution to go into Qatar, and we were succeeded by Cornell in medicine and Texas A&M in engineering and Carnegie Mellon in business and computer science and Georgetown in international relations and Northwestern in mass comm and University College London in archaeology. Those are great partners for Virginia Commonwealth University and recognized as such. But that was part of a major branding exercise that the university has really worked on in the last 20 years, 25 years, and certainly continues in a dramatic fashion under President Rao, and properly so.
Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship with Qatar? How did that happen?
I give full credit to that to our former dean of the School of the Arts, Richard Toscan. Interestingly enough, I spent an hour on a telephone call with a doctoral student at the University of Pennsylvania on our partnership with Qatar. The Qatar Foundation, and we were their first partner, they discovered Virginia Commonwealth University through U.S. News and World Report. And our School of the Arts has always been a very highly ranked school in U.S. News and World Report, only behind Yale and the Chicago Art Institute. And they came to us and asked us, would it be possible for us to consider teaching art students in Qatar? And under Dr. Toscan's leadership, we looked seriously at it. And then it was a pretty elaborate process because it needed the sign-off of the faculty of the School of the Arts. It needed the sign-off of the faculty of the university more generally. It needed the sign-off of the Board of Visitors. It needed the sign-off of the state SHEV, of the State Commission for Higher Education. It needed to go to the legislature and be approved by the House and the Senate, and then signed into law by the governor. And in any of those steps, it could have faltered. As one example, on that voyage, we were moving ahead with this, and UVA was looking at partnering with the Qatar Foundation, and for their own reasons decided that they would not do it. And then the question was, well, if it's not good enough for UVA, why is it good enough for VCU? A question asked about the health system, why, when we set up a health system, originally it was going to be a partnership with UVA, and they backed out of that. And the legislature immediately asked the question, why do you need it if UVA doesn't need it? So it was a voyage to get the partnership, and now it's been a more than 20-year partnership with the Qatar Foundation. And I think we have benefited here in Richmond, but clearly Qatar has benefited, has had the education of, in particular, women who are now training in graphic design, in fashion design, in interior design, and other careers. So it's been a good partnership, and I'm hopeful that it's going to continue.
So starting with the emergence of the School for the Arts, but also the emergence of the engineering school, I want to talk a little bit about how did that idea evolve?
Yeah, in the early 1990s, Richmond was the largest city in the United States by a lot without a School of Engineering. And I believe that that is something that really impeded economic development in the Richmond area. My father, who was born in Messina in Sicily and came to the United States as an infant and then went back and then came back again, studied engineering at Cornell. So I think I understood the importance of engineering for new Americans and for areas geographically. So in the early 1990s, the Chamber of Commerce began to look seriously at should there be a School of Engineering. And actually the University of Richmond looked at the establishment of a School of Engineering and made the decision that they were not interested in doing that. In the meantime, the Dean of Engineering at Virginia Tech and eventually President of Virginia Tech, Paul Torgerson, was committed to helping the Richmond area solve the problem of undergraduate engineering. Now, undergraduate education is not off the Blacksburg campus. Graduate education is, and they are all over Northern Virginia, serve a lot of offerings here in the Richmond community, but not at the undergraduate level. So there was no way that Virginia Tech's School of Engineering could set up a branch campus here. And what President Torgerson, or then Dean Torgerson, agreed was that they would do a partnership with VCU initially for the first 3 years, and then VCU could go ahead with the School of Engineering. And there was a momentous single event in terms of that. I went out to sign an agreement with with the then Dean Torgerson at Virginia Tech. Grace Harris and I hopped on a plane, and as we were approaching Blacksburg to get the signature, the pilot said, "It's too foggy, I can't land." I said, "You just keep on going around. You're going to land this plane." So eventually it cleared up a little bit, and he landed the plane. And it turned out that Paul Torgerson agreed that day that there would be a joint VCU Virginia Tech School of Engineering. The same day he was appointed acting president. So that was very significant. The other thing that the School of Engineering would have never occurred is without the business community, and in particular, Bill Goodwin and Ken Wright and their dramatic generosity. And I am at the stage of my life where the history is important. I teach in the Honors College, and I go to men's basketball games. But I'm amazed that the School of Engineering now has over 2,000 students and 100 faculty members. That's a very significant School of Engineering. So the business community has played a dramatic part, and the current dean, Barbara Boyan, is doing an excellent job. And the merging of engineering and medicine and pharmacy is without question where the future of engineering is and where the future of this School of Engineering is.
As you've been doing your research, we've been thinking about who are the unsung heroes. There are folks along the way that names been lost but are important and critical to the school.
You know, I thought about that, and if I start naming names, I
Go
would
ahead.
end up leaving out important people. But I will say that I did a lot of oral history interviews in the process of the research. And the striking thing is that everyone I spoke with, everybody from administrators to faculty members to former students, everyone is proud of the part they had in making this university. No one expressed regrets, no one expressed sorrows, no one came back with anger. People looked back and said that they worked really hard and that they were very proud of what they had accomplished. And I think one of the striking things about a university, it's an image that actually former Dean Bob Holsworth gave to me, which is the university is a giant cruise ship. And the captain's up there steering, but it doesn't necessarily move very quickly. But there are people elsewhere on the ship who are trying to make it go different directions at the same time. And it's a very complicated institution with connections everywhere. And the people who every day come in and do their work and make this a better place are truly unsung. And yet it's those folks who, in a way, are their efforts get symbolized by a focus on a few movers and shakers who made things happen, that it's been a group effort across 50 years.
Jody, any favorites?
Well, I'll give a shout out to Kinlo Nelson. He was the Dean of Medicine, I think, at a pivotal time. For one, he got a feuding faculty to finally agree to the new modern medical curriculum, which they adopted in 1964. But I think he also helped smooth the way with the merger as well. I mean, it wasn't our integrated university we have today, but he very much tried to put out some of the fires and encourage people to give the new university an opportunity.
I would like to add to what Jody just said to David Hume, who was the chair of surgery and came from Harvard and was a transplant specialist and eventually presided over VCU's amazing transplant history. And there's an interesting book called Every Second Counts that some of you might be interested in, which is the Race to the First Heart Transplant, which was Stanford, Minnesota, MCV, as it was then known, and South Africa. And it's really a gripping book. At one key point, Hume took on some prominent alums who were trying to undo the merger and take out the legislation of 1968 and recreate the Medical College of Virginia as a separate freestanding institution. And Hume really went after those alums and said that you need to support the university and you ought to spend your time with the legislature to give the university and its medical center as much flexibility as it can have in terms of the clinical operations of the hospital. And I think that was a very courageous stand by David Hume, who sadly eventually died in a plane accident in California. But he stood as a giant and headed off what I think would have been a major mistake to undo the merger of 1968.
You know, in 68, this was a place that needed an urban university. What does it mean to be an urban university today? We'll start with John.
I think VCU has struggled at times to define exactly what being an urban university actually means. And I don't have an easy answer for it, but I will tell you that recently I read a new book, a collection of oral histories, about the music scene in Charlottesville, Virginia, which doesn't sound particularly relevant. But in fact, what came through was the absolute town-gown separation in Charlottesville. And that's not the case here, whether it be the music scene or the interactions of people in business, people in engineering, people at the medical school. VCU is fully part of the community, engaged with it, and attentive to community needs with a demonstrated record of doing that. Richmond's hardly a perfect place, but it has gone through awfully difficult times, and VCU has been an anchor for the city of Richmond. And Richmond, I think, is on the way up, certainly as VCU is, and they've done so together. So I think there's, rather than the notion of VCU as an urban university doing things to Richmond, it has been an urban university as a partner in the city.
Yeah, and some of those partnerships are very deep-rooted. So when the Wayne Commission made their recommendation, they were actually building on strengths of the two component institutions that would form the university. So there was a long time in providing health care for the community in a variety of programs.
What were some of those partnerships?
Well, let's see, what's a good one to pull up? Many of the kind of the healthcare ones, again, Ken Lowe Nelson mentioning him again, he for a long time had a home healthcare program that he went out to patients in need. In fact, he used to drive an old VW Bug around and have residents drive around with him to see patients and taking care to the patients instead of making them all come in to the medical center.
What's an urban university?
I believe that's the wave of the future. 50% of the universities are located in urban areas. You talk about A&M's, Texas A&M, and it no longer is agricultural and mechanical. It's athletics and medicine. And they all want medical centers. They're all creating medical schools because clearly the wave of the future is the intersection of health and the rest of life. And we clearly are doing that in a dramatic fashion here at Virginia Commonwealth University. I would also say in terms of our medical center, it was important for us to anchor the downtown campus of Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU's health, but at the same time, it was important to have outreach areas. And one of the early decisions that I brought to the Board of Visitors was to create Stony Point. And there were board members who opposed that. The VCU was downtown, and there were physicians who were graduates of our School of Medicine or other health sciences who also said VCU ought to stay downtown. But Stony Point has led to ability to access this major medical center. So I think that was also a very critical time for VCU. But I'd go back again to 50 years in the development of a university. That's without any question the major thing that has occurred. And I teach honors, a course in leadership. And in fact, our moderator gave an excellent presentation to my students. A lot of them are here because of the medical center. Whether they want to go into medicine or dentistry or forensic science or physical therapy, we have become a real place for graduate and undergraduate education in the life sciences. And the creation of VCU Life Sciences, headed initially by Tom Huff, who died tragically at too early an age, helped the integration of bringing together the two campuses. I will tell you two stories about that. You didn't ask me, but I'll tell you what's the most embarrassing event in my 19 years as president.
That was actually my next question.
So the Board of Visitors very generously decided to name the new Life Sciences building after me and my wife, more importantly, because Lois came here to Richmond as a CRNA, a nurse anesthetist, and gave up her career to become the First Lady of Virginia Commonwealth University, and in the end has devoted over 2,000 hours of volunteer time over the last 20-some years to our medical center. So they built this building, and they were going to dedicate the building, and we were going to dedicate it in September of 2001. And then came 9/11, and we postponed the dedication. But an election took place in 2001, and a new governor was elected, and his name was Mark Warner. So the night of the dedication, which was in late November, we had one of his first major appearances was to welcome people to this gorgeous new life sciences building. And I had one obligation. All I had to do was introduce the new governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I stood up there and said, and now it is my great pleasure to introduce the governor-elect of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mark Earley. That's who he ran against. And without breaking into a sweat, and to show you how quick and bright Senator Warner is, he said, "Thank you, President John Castine, for that wonderful." And everybody thought it was planned. I was, in fact, mortified. It was not planned. But again, it shows the community support because life sciences has become such a key thing. When we made the effort to look at VCU as a center for life sciences, I decided to go visit all the schools and the departments that I thought should be involved in life sciences. And I can remember going to the psychology department, and they denied they were a life science department. They quickly got on board. The philosophy department, maybe to this day, still denies their life science department, even though major philosophical issues on life and death permeate American philosophical questions. So I think the commitment of VCU Life Sciences, VCU to Life Sciences, which has been supported beyond belief by Mrs. Inger Rice. She came to see me one day, and this is another story I perhaps should not be saying publicly, but I will say it, to tell me that she had a charitable forward trust for VCU, and she was going to put it in the Department of Fashion Design because it had helped her dramatically figure out what she wanted to do and how she wanted to approach life here in Richmond. And I listened to her and said, we're very appreciative. Charitable forward trust is you get the interest off whatever the amount was, and in the end it goes back to the family. And she said, and by the way, I have 300 and some acres on the James River I don't know what to do with. And this is old Camp Wyandotte, the YMCA camp. And I said, why don't you combine the two things and give the acreage to VCU, and we will set up a major life sciences environmental research center. And the charitable forward trust will not go to the Department of Fashion Design. They may know that for the first time. But go, in fact, to VCU Life Sciences. And she's now put, I want to say $8 million into the Rice Center. And it's just incredible what is going on down there in that 300 and some acres in terms of both VCU and now William and Mary and Eagles and Sturgeon to really understand. It's become one of the premier research centers for VCU, and again, integrating the medical center and issues of toxicology and the James River. So,
one last question. What's the one thing you'll always remember about your experience at VCU, John?
Being overwhelmed by the opportunities. There's so many opportunities to do things at VCU. There are so many people who are engaged in interesting things that you can get involved with, and so many students who are enthusiastic. I tell people that I've taught at other universities, and at those schools, the students are very much the same, and if you learn how to pitch it down the middle, you can survive in the classroom, and that's not the case at VCU. Students come from so many different directions, so many different backgrounds, that you've got to really truly be on your toes. And so I think what I would say is that VCU is a place where, well, I'll quote Frank Brooke at the first convocation in 1968. This is where the action is.
Just how much the university has changed over its first 5 decades and how it's able to kind of sustain that and to keep vibrant, and how scrappy it is as well. It's not always been as resourced as we might like, but in spite of that, a lot of good things happen, and it continues to change and evolve.
Fondest memory.
fondest memory. Just the honor to come here and serve as the 4th president, and then to have 19 years of constructive activity with the faculty, with the students, and with the community. So, as I said, it was a joy to serve as president, and it's been a joy to work with my colleague, John Kneebone, on this history of VCU, which is now a 519-page manuscript that you're all going to buy copies of when it gets published.
So when's the book available?
It's presently being read by outside readers at University Press of Virginia, and we'll see where we go from there.
Dr. Trani, Jody, John, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit about the history of this place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.